The day before, Claire had sent me a message.
Dr. Morel, you have a new patient. He has requested a 3-hour consultation. He said the conversation would be long. Do you confirm?
3 hours. That was unusual. My schedule was calculated to the minute. Even ministers and public figures knew it. I allowed exactly 60 minutes, no more, no less. But this time, I didn't refuse. Something in that request had piqued my curiosity. Who was he, to be willing to pay a substantial sum for a 3-hour session? I confirmed the appointment. When the day came, Claire opened the office door. Her usually stern expression had softened. She had unconsciously touched her hair, the way women sometimes do when a man awakens something instinctive in them. Strange. Claire remained impenetrable, even in the presence of Hollywood-caliber beauty.
He has arrived,
She said, slightly more softly than usual.
Shall I show him in?
I nodded. He entered. First assessment. Tall, around 35. Athletic build, functional rather than decorative muscle. He didn't look like a bodybuilder. His body read more like an instrument, strength calculated for practical use. White t-shirt and jeans. No brand, no accessories. Minimalism or indifference to appearance. Or, on the contrary, carefully studied neutrality. He had the face of a man accustomed to staying in control. High cheekbones, a straight nose with a barely visible old break. Full lips, the kind women find attractive, but closed, not from tension, rather from a habit of silence. But above all, the eyes, cold, piercing, the eyes of a lion on the hunt. Women would be delighted. I know he's dangerous, and yet I would surrender to him. Any woman who met him would say, and he no doubt knew his power of attraction. He did not ask, he took, and that didn't drive women away. On the contrary, they seemed ready to become his willing victims. He stopped. Important detail, no trace of cologne, only the faint scent of clean skin. Please sit down, I said, gesturing toward the chair. He sat smoothly, silently, with that grace that betrays men accustomed to mastering any situation. He was reading me just as I was reading him. This was not a patient who had come seeking help. This was something else. I looked up from my notepad. He held my gaze calmly. Within that calm lurked an imperceptible threat, not overt, but like a faint electric current running through the room. "What shall I call you?" I asked. He gave a slight smile, barely sketched at the corner of his lips.
Alex,
He replied. That smile didn't warm the room. It had something predatory about it, yet without ostentatious aggression, like a big cat that knows, if it wishes, it will crush you without effort. Alex, I repeated, making a note. What brings you to see me? He was silent for a moment, surveying the office. His gaze slid over the diplomas on the wall, over the bookshelves, paused on certain details. He was evaluating, memorizing.
your reputation, and the guarantee of confidentiality.
Medical confidentiality is the foundation of my work, I replied. That is beyond question. He nodded, but a glimmer passed through his eyes, as if he were verifying not only my words, but the sincerity with which I spoke them. If you are so concerned about confidentiality, I continued, why would you want to confide your secrets to anyone at all? Alex leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. A slow, calculated movement.
Because I have seen that you truly keep your word. That is why I am giving you a chance.
A chance? I pressed.
Either you keep everything secret as you promise,
He said, his voice lower but firm.
or I will not be able to allow you to break your word.
A pause. This was not a direct threat, but an implicit truth. This man did not tolerate betrayal, and he was capable of anything. I leaned back in my chair without looking away. Alex, a doctor's word is not a contract with the devil. It is a professional ethic I have upheld for 20 years. If you came to me, it is because you trust that principle. Otherwise, why waste your time? He studied me for a few more seconds. Then his face softened slightly, though the vigilance did not disappear.
Very well,
He said.
then let us talk.
I had picked up my pen, ready to take notes, but Alex raised his hand.
No notes,
He said calmly.
only the conversation.
Interesting. Most patients want the opposite. They want their words recorded. It gives them the illusion that their problem matters. Alex, evidently, preferred to leave fewer traces. I set down my pen. What would you like to talk about? He leaned back in the chair without relaxing. Every muscle remained alert, like a lion ready to spring.
Work.
He said simply. What is your work?
I solve problems.
Classic evasion. But there was sincerity in his tone. He genuinely saw his activity that way. What kind of problems? Alex fell silent, gazing out the window. Beyond the glass, treetops, the peaceful pulse of city life. The contrast between that ordinariness and the aura of the man before me was striking.
People create problems
He said at last.
through their decisions, their actions, their greed. Sometimes those problems become critical. Then someone calls on me.
And you resolve them?
Yes,
How exactly? A smile grazed his lips. Not joyful, rather bitter.
efficiently.
Interim assessment. Seated before me was a man who made his living doing what most people would consider unthinkable, and yet he showed none of the classic signs of sociopathy. No sadism, no pleasure in inflicting pain. On the contrary, his voice carried fatigue. He was a professional, cold, calculating, but not devoid of inner conflict. Alex, you didn't come to see me to boast about your work. I said, what is troubling you? He looked at me carefully, as if assessing whether I was capable of hearing the truth.
I'm beginning to feel
He said quietly. Feel what?
What I do before, it was just a task, a technical matter. Now,
He clenched his fists.
now I see their faces, I hear their last words, I remember their pleas.
First crack in the armor. Empathy was breaking through the professional detachment. How long have you been in this profession?
12 years.
And this is only beginning now. Since 6 months
Ago,
What changed 6 months ago? Alex fell silent. His interlaced fingers tightened. I noticed a small surgical scar on the back of his right hand. Another at the wrist. Traces of professional activity. Tell me from the beginning. How did you come to this profession? Alex leaned back, and for the first time since he had entered, I saw something resembling ease.
childhood in Lyon. Mother was a school teacher, father died young.
His voice softened.
My mother had enrolled me in modern pentathlon. There was shooting, you know.
I nodded.
The first time I picked up a rifle,
He smiled, but with bitterness.
I understood it was something I couldn't live without. I hit the target on the first shot. The coach said I had a natural talent, stress resistance, phenomenal endurance.
Did your mother support this passion?
She was proud. I won competitions. I competed in championships. Thanks to my shooting results, by the time I came of age, I had acquired skills close to those of military snipers. The army noticed. In 2008, I was recruited into a special forces unit. I volunteered and underwent specific training linked to military intelligence.
Special forces?
Sniper unit. They sent me on missions. First to Africa, then the Balkans, the Middle East.
Did you feel useful? Alex's eyes lit up.
Exactly. In conflict zones, I felt truly alive. Every shot had meaning. Every mission was critical. Adrenaline, precision, result.
He clenched his fists. And when the service ended,
I couldn't stop. Peaceful life felt empty. I needed the adrenaline. You understand?
he stood up, walked to the window.
War zones became like a safari to me. I went as a volunteer, as a mercenary, and in between.
In between, private contracts appeared. A reputation travels fast in certain circles.
Theater, reception, airplane, high security apartment.
A note of professional pride rang in his voice.
I could get past a dozen bodyguards and no one would notice.
Refined psychological portrait. A perfectionist, creative approach to assignments. High self-esteem grounded in genuine achievement. Adrenaline dependency. Alex, and your relationship with your mother, with your family. He turned away from the window, his face softening.
Mom, she still thinks I work as a security consultant. I call her every week. I visit for the holidays.
He gave a faint smile.
She has a cat, Marcel, an old Tom. He's the only one who has seen through me. He hisses when I arrive.
Do you love animals?
Yes.
The answer was immediate.
I have 2 dogs at home, a German Shepherd and a mixed breed. I took in the puppies found on the street during a mission.
Contradiction with the expected profile. Empathy toward animals. Care for his mother. Alex, you said something changed 6 months ago. After you stopped going to war zones? He came back and sat down on the edge of the chair, leaning forward.
They started coming.
He said softly. Who?
The victims.
He ran a hand through his hair.
First in dreams. Then I seem to see them while awake. They stand in a corner of the room. They watch. They don't accuse. They don't threaten. They just watch.
How often does this happen?
Every night. Sometimes during the day too.
His voice trembled. Doctor, I have killed 73 people in 12 years, and I remember every one of them. But it is only now that I am beginning to feel them. He fell silent, staring at the floor.
You understand, before it was work, a technical task. Calculate the trajectory, choose the moment, execute, cleanly, beautifully, professionally.
He looked up. And now I hear their pleas. I see the fear in their eyes, and I cannot forget it anymore. I let the silence settle. Sometimes patients need time to hear their own words. Diagnostic notes. Delayed onset post-traumatic stress disorder. A classic case. Years of suppressing emotional reactions, and now the psyche demands compensation. Flashbacks, hallucinations, obsessive memories. But nuances emerge. PTSD typically develops in victims of traumatic events. Here, it is the patient himself who inflicted the trauma. That complicates the picture. Guilt, moral conflict, and identity crisis are added to the mix. The adrenaline dependency poses a real problem. The body has grown accustomed to constant extreme situations. Ordinary life seems dull, devoid of meaning. Alex, I said, judging by the fact that you can afford my services, you have no financial difficulties. Why not simply stop this work? He smiled bitterly. You think I have
Not tried.
He stood and went to the window again.
A year ago I took a 6-month break. I rented a villa in Provence, read books, did sport, studied painting.
And?
After a month, I was wandering like a lost soul.
He turned around.
You understand, doctor, I do my work impeccably. A task, however complex, is resolved elegantly, quickly, without traces. It is the only thing in which I am truly talented.
And other aspects of life?
Which aspects?
Fatigue and a hint of irritation sounded in his voice.
I tried business. I was bored. Everything too predictable, too slow. Women.
He paused. What about women?
They are too easy a prey.
He said honestly.
I read people like an open book. I know what to say, how to behave. For me, it's a one-sided game. But relationships, real relationships, demand vulnerability, and I cannot afford that.
Why? Alex returned to the chair, sat down, placed his hands on his knees.
My work does not forgive weakness. If you have someone you love, you have a vulnerability.
His voice hardened.
In my world, that is mortally dangerous.
But your mother...
My mother is an exception. I hide that connection very carefully. I visit rarely, under various pretexts. To the outside world, she does not exist.
He clenched his fists.
But a woman, children, that would mean a constant threat to them, a permanent fear for their lives. Enemies show no mercy to families.
Greater than... Deeper analysis. The classic trap of the professional killer. Work isolates him from normal life, but no alternative is visible. His skills don't transfer to civilian spheres. Social bonds are limited for security reasons. Add adrenaline dependency and the habit of control, and you get a vicious circle. Alex, would you have wanted a family? For the first time in the entire conversation, I saw something resembling genuine pain in his eyes.
Of course I would.
He said quietly.
Sometimes I imagine a house, children, an ordinary life.
He smiled.
But those are only fantasies. In reality, I would be condemning them to death.
It turns out your profession not only feeds you, but also deprives you of everything else?
Exactly.
He looked me in the eyes.
And now it is destroying me from within as well. Before, I could cut off emotions. Now they are coming back, all at once. 73 people come to me every night and ask, "Why did you take my life?"
And what do you answer them? Nothing. His voice went flat.
Because I do not know the answer.
I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on what I had heard. Alex, you are presenting the classic symptoms of delayed onset post-traumatic stress disorder, with, additionally, adrenaline dependency and a profound existential crisis. I looked at him carefully. But the main problem is that you are trapped by your own success.
Meaning?
You are so good at what you do that you see no way out. But the psyche is no longer holding. It demands change. Either you find a way to change your life, or you will destroy yourself completely. Alex nodded, as if I had simply put into words what he already knew.
Doctor, when I underwent psychological testing before being selected for the sniper unit, they found some interesting deviations in me across several scales.
I was immediately interested. An important detail. Which indicators exactly?
On the empathy questionnaire for abstract concepts, the results were unusual.
Alex spoke calmly, as if discussing the weather.
Empathy toward humans, or affective empathy, practically 0 points. The ability to emotionally share in another's pain was minimal. On the other hand, cognitive empathy reached almost the maximum, 42 points, out of 45 possible.
Diagnostic precision. Cognitive empathy refers to a person's ability to construct in their consciousness a model of another's emotional state. Affective empathy refers to the capacity to be sensitive to and vicariously experience another's feelings. Classic functional psychopath profile. Not a clinical case, but rather an adaptive trait. Such individuals often become surgeons, pilots, successful military personnel, wherever emotional detachment is critical. And on the revised hair psychopathy checklist, the PCLR. Alex smiled.
23 points out of 40, borderline zone.
He shrugged.
High enough to be an effective sniper, but not enough to be dangerous to society. The psychologist said I had controlled psychopathy.
Interesting. And the polygraph.
Never worked on me.
Alex replied with faint pride.
I have an innate characteristic of the nervous system, an almost total absence of physiological reactions to stress. Pulse, blood pressure, perspiration remain stable even in critical situations. Complete emotional shutdown. When everything truly is indifferent to you, lying triggers no physiological reactions. He could pass every check. In government institutions, sensitive sites, private corporations.
And how did that manifest itself at work?
Perfectly.
Alex replied without a shadow of pride.
I could kill a person and 5 minutes later eat dinner calmly. I would completely forget the victim, their name, their words, any contact, if there had been no contact.
He shrugged.
I would change my clothes and go to a concert.
And now?
Now it has become a real problem.
Bitterness pierced his voice.
I remember every detail, every word. Their faces haunt me. What was once my advantage has turned into a curse.
I noted mentally. Awakening of affective empathy in adulthood. An extremely rare case. Possible result of accumulated stress or the natural maturation of the psyche. Alex, do you have plans for the future? He was silent, looking out the window.
I plan to finish this.
He said at last.
Leave the profession permanently.
And do what?
Perhaps travel, change of scenery, different countries.
He looked at me.
I need to change my environment often. I can't stay in the same place for long. Too many memories, too many ghosts.
I reflected. The idea wasn't without merit. You know, Alex, perhaps travel is exactly what you need. I said slowly. A change of environment will help break the associative links with the past. New impressions can gradually replace traumatic memories.
You think that will help?
Partially, yes. But you will also need psychological work. I leaned forward. You are undergoing a fundamental restructuring of the personality. Empathy is awakening after years of suppression. It is a painful process, but it means you are returning to humanity. Alex listened carefully.
What do you propose?
A gradual exit from the profession. No sudden moves. The psyche might not withstand it. Travel, a good idea. But in every country, find a specialist to talk to. And above all, find something that will give your life meaning. Not adrenaline, meaning.
And if it doesn't work?
I looked him honestly in the eyes. Then the ghosts will win, and you will become another victim of your own profession. Alex nodded slowly.
Understood.
He said,
Thank you for your honesty, Dr. Morel.
I noticed there was still an hour and a half remaining in the 3-hour session. The surface diagnosis was complete, but for a real understanding, the details needed to be explored further. Alex, I said, setting aside the imaginary notepad. I need to understand the mechanism of the changes that have occurred in you. A simple description of symptoms is not enough. Tell me about your last mission. What exactly happened? How did everything unfold? He froze, as if I had asked him to undress. His fingers slowly curled into fists, knuckles whitening.
That is... It's very complicated, doctor. I have never told anyone the details.
I understand, but I need precisely the details. Your sensations, your thoughts, how you behaved at the time, and how you feel now. Only that way can I truly help you. Alex rose abruptly, went to the window, turned his back to me. His shoulders tensed.
All right,
He said after a long pause.
but it will take time, and I am not sure I am ready today.
I checked the time. Enough remained in our 3-hour session. We have time, Alex, and it was you yourself who asked for 3 hours. It was the first step toward expression. He slowly turned back toward me.
Yes, perhaps you are right.
He took a deep breath.
Then prepare yourself, Dr. Morel. What I am about to tell you may change your view of human nature. It was 6 months ago at La Scala in Milan. It was the opening night of a Verdi opera, La Traviata.
His voice became strangely monotone, like that of a man reciting a memorized lesson.
The target, a Russian oligarch named Sergei Kryuchkov. He was seated in box number 7 on the 2nd floor. The client had paid the highest rate. That always means particular complexity or political motives.
He spoke, and I noted the subtle shifts in his behavior. His voice had turned mechanical, but his posture betrayed a contained tension. Tell me about the preparation. How did you plan the operation?
2 weeks of studying the target.
He said, still staring at the window.
Kryuchkov was a music lover. He attended all the major premieres. He stayed at the Bulgari Hotel, top floor suite. His security, 4 men. But at the theater, they stayed in the foyer. In the box, he was always alone with a woman.
What did you know about him as a person? Alex finally turned around. I saw a flicker of perplexity in his eyes.
Before, that didn't interest me. A target is a target, but
He paused.
for cover, I studied his biography. 60 years old, widower, 2 adult children, 4 grandchildren. He collected antique violins. He funded orphanages in Russia. Strange, isn't it? A man who had made his fortune through oil and politics, helping orphans.
That surprised you.
At the time, no. Now,
He ran a hand through his hair.
now I think about it every day.
Go on. Tell me about that evening.
I was in a black dinner jacket like all the other patrons, seat in the stalls, 7th row, a perfect view of every box.
He hesitated.
The weapon, a special stiletto, disguised as an antique tie-pin, made by a jeweler in Toledo, hollow inside, filled with curare and additives, 1 prick, and within 2 minutes it resembled a cardiac arrest.
My observations. Technical precision in the details. Manifest dissociation. He recounts this as if describing someone else's experience, but emotion surfaces when he speaks of the victim as a person. What were you feeling as you prepared for the operation? Inside that theater?
Nothing in particular.
He answered too quickly.
The usual anticipation of a successful operation, like a chess player before a fine combination or a surgeon before a delicate procedure. Controlled adrenaline, the pleasant excitement of coming perfection.
And when you saw Khrushchev in the box? Alex was silent for a long time. His breathing quickened.
He was laughing.
He said at last, and his voice trembled.
The first act had ended. The intermission was beginning. I made my way up toward the boxes, pretending to be a knowledgeable opera enthusiast. The idea was that I wanted to make the acquaintance of a patron of the arts.
He took a deep breath.
I saw him. He was embracing his companion, an elegant woman in her 50s, and laughing heartily. He was telling her something about the staging. Then he took out his phone and began showing photographs.
Photographs.
Of his grandchildren.
His voice went quiet.
A little girl of 5 in a pink ballet dress, an older boy with a new bicycle. He was saying,
Vera wants to become a ballerina like her mother. And Maxime dreams of bicycle racing. I promise to take him to the Tour de France next year. I could see Alex's expression changing. The technical detachment was giving way to a growing anguish. And what happened next?
The plan required acting precisely during the intermission. I approached.
Alex passed a hand over his face.
I congratulated him on his birthday. I knew he had turned 60 the week before. He was genuinely pleased. He said, "Forgive me, do we know each other?" I knew everything about him, and I knew he had a poor memory for faces. I replied that we had often crossed paths at opera premieres in various countries, the last time, a year earlier, in Amsterdam, at the premiere of We Are the Lucky Ones by Philipp Venables, libretto by Nina Segel and Ted Hoffman.
He specified.
He frowned slightly, but I continued. Your bodyguards and my security detail had argued near the cloakroom. The theatre director had to intervene. Afterward, we had dined at Kramer's in a private room with Monsieur Leroy. He nodded gently, as if this convinced him. To divert his attention, I spoke of current events. Do you also love Verdi? Oh, it is my favorite opera. Violetta is divine tonight. And he invited me to join them for champagne after the performance.
For the first time since the beginning of our conversation, I saw acute pain in Alex's eyes. Alex, what did you feel in that moment?
Nothing.
The answer shot out abruptly, almost aggressively.
Absolutely nothing. I was a professional, no emotion, no doubt. A mission is a mission.
But you carried out the mission.
Yes.
His voice became almost a whisper.
I embraced him like an old friend encountered by chance at the theatre. A warm embrace, as is customary in his circles. I introduced the stiletto precisely below the third cervical vertebra, between the muscles. Technically flawless. He didn't even understand what had happened. He kept smiling and talking about his grandchildren.
And then
I thanked him for the invitation, said I would join them after the finale. Then I went back to my seat and watched the second act.
his voice became completely hollow.
Violetta was dying on stage to Verdi's music, and in box number 7 they were already discreetly calling for emergency services. The audience assumed Kryuchkov had fallen ill, a cardiac arrest in an elderly man during a performance. Nothing unusual.
And what did you do?
After the finale, I went to dinner at the Savini restaurant in the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele. I ordered ossobuco alla milanese and drank a bottle of Chianti Classico 2015.
He spoke like an automaton.
I read the news on my phone. I followed the first reports on Kryuchkov's death. I analyzed the reactions of the markets, the political world, his family.
And when did the changes begin? Alex stared at the floor, opening and closing his fists.
That same night, I woke at 4 in the morning in my hotel room. Not alone, I felt a hand on my shoulder. He looked up and I saw horror in his eyes. Kryuchkov was standing by my bed, in the same dinner jacket he had worn at the theatre, smiling that same warm, kind smile, and he asked softly, "Why, my son? What for? What harm did I ever do you?"
Analysis. Classic breakthrough of psychological defenses. Empathy suppressed for years manifested as a meaningful, emotionally charged hallucination. What did you answer him?
Nothing.
Alex clenched his fists until it hurt.
I didn't know what to say. For the first time in 12 years of activity, I had no answer.
He breathed with difficulty.
I have an iron rule. Never ask clients their motives. Money is money. A target is a target. But this time, it became important. I understood that I had killed a good man, a grandfather who loved opera, his grandchildren, and who wanted to marry a woman he truly loved.
And how did that affect you?
For 3 days, I could not listen to music. It reminded me of that evening. I thought constantly of his family, of how they had learned of his death. His little granddaughter Vera asking why grandfather hadn't come to her recital.
His voice began to tremble.
For the first time in 12 years, I felt a monster, a murderer of an innocent man.
Silence fell over the office, heavy as a curtain. I gave him time to collect himself. Alex, this capacity to feel is not a curse. It is a return to humanity.
But it is destroying me, doctor.
He said with despair.
Every night they come, all 73, not only Kryuchkov, all of them, and each one asks the same thing. Why? What for? What harm did I do?
He clenched his jaw.
And I have no answer to any of their questions, because most of them were simply people who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or who had become an obstacle to someone else's plans.
I spoke softly. Because for the first time, you have begun to see them as human beings, not as targets, people with feelings, dreams, families. He nodded slowly, without looking up.
Doctor, is it possible to reactivate that state, return to what I was before?
Before I answer, tell me about other cases. How did you work before, when emotions no longer hindered you? Alex settled back in the chair. For the first time since the conversation began, his posture became more relaxed, as if the memories of his professional successes were restoring his confidence.
A moment before, everything was clean, elegant.
A certain pride entered his voice.
I remember a case in Geneva 2 years ago. Target, a Swiss banker who knew too much about the financing of terrorist groups. Every Friday at 1 o'clock he lunched at his favorite restaurant. He always ordered the same thing, fish soup and trout.
And
I got myself hired as a waiter for a single shift. I passed the interview, the checks. They were superficial for temporary staff.
a faint smile touched his lips.
I added a compound to the soup that acts after 5 hours. It mimics a cardiac arrest with absolute precision. When he died that evening at home, I was already on the plane to Paris.
What did you feel then?
The satisfaction of technical perfection, like a watchmaker assembling a perfect mechanism.
He went quiet.
And now I remember his face when he thanked me for the excellent service. He even left a generous tip.
I nodded, taking mental notes. Tell me about other methods.
In Vienna, there was an interesting operation.
Alex began speaking faster, as if immersing himself in his professional memories.
A famous tenor, a soloist at the Vienna Opera. The assassination had been commissioned by a rival, another singer who couldn't secure the leading roles. Jealousy in the art world can be lethal.
How did you proceed?
I bought a box right next to his. During the intermission of Tosca, he was singing Cavaradossi. I went to congratulate him on his performance. In the artists' boxes, it's always chaos, people coming and going. I approached him with flowers and slipped the needle into his neck, a lethal dose of epinephrine. His heart would tear itself apart within minutes.
His voice vibrated with technical precision.
Everyone assumed it was a stroke from overexertion. It happens often enough with opera singers.
And the most complex operations. Alex's eyes lit up. The professional was speaking of his masterworks.
Brazil last year, a drug lord guarded by 20 men. The only way to get close, become his pilot.
He leaned forward.
3 months of preparation. I obtained a pilot's license.
He smiled.
Dick then bought a forged logbook with 1,800 hours of flight, including 900 as commander on a small aircraft. The papers looked authentic. They listed flights across South America, the Caribbean, and even some jet flights.
He shrugged slightly.
I passed all the checks, including the polygraph. As always, it never worked on me. My emotional detachment was total. No physiological reaction to lying.
And how did it end?
During the flight over the Amazon jungle, I parachuted out. The plane crashed, the apparent victim of a technical failure.
He gave an almost dreamy smile.
I landed in a pre-prepared zone where a boat was waiting, a perfect operation, no trace, no suspicion.
Were there cases involving heavy security?
Oh yes.
Alex smiled.
A Russian oligarch in London, a dozen bodyguards, armored car, verified routes, but he was to undergo a heart transplant at a private London clinic. The operation was to be performed by a surgeon who had come specially from Germany, Dr. Holz.
He paused.
He used a new method, transcatheter aortic valve implantation, which allowed the patient to leave the clinic the very next day.
He lowered his voice, almost with satisfaction.
I went to collect Dr. Holtz at the airport, having assumed the role of the clinic's driver, and took him to a house I had rented. In the basement, he was comfortable. Nothing threatened him. After the operation, before releasing the doctor, I injected him with midazolam. He wandered as if through a fog for a few hours, then completely forgot what had happened in the previous 10 hours.
You entered the clinic and performed open-heart surgery. I asked, struggling to contain my outrage and not betray my irritation.
Yes, no one at the London clinic had ever met that German surgeon. At school, my first language was German. Imitating his accent wasn't difficult for me, and so I became the surgeon for one operation.
Professional pride resonated in his voice.
I had watched several recordings of Dr. Holtz's operations. When the moment came, I was ready to play the role. I imitated him so perfectly that no one had the slightest doubt.
He smiled briefly.
I had even learned a few learned phrases he always repeated, and I would pronounce them regularly. Few people understood their exact meaning, so no one asked questions.
He shrugged again.
The operation went well. I injected a lethal dose of potassium chloride directly into the myocardium. To everyone present, it resembled an intraoperative complication. Cardiac failure on the operating table is not rare in cardiac surgery.
And car accidents?
Classic of the genre.
Alex shrugged.
A German industrialist on the motorway near Munich. Speed, 200 kilometers per hour. A precise shot into the front right tire from 800 meters. The car lost control and slammed into the barrier. I retrieved the casing. No trace.
How did you gain access to protected targets?
That was my specialty.
A familiar excitement lit his eyes.
I could become anyone. A waiter, a doctor, a bodyguard, a pilot, even a government official. The polygraph, as I said, never worked on me. Total emotional shutdown. Psychological tests at hiring. I passed them without difficulty. I could work in government institutions, obtain clearances for sensitive sites.
What was the key to success?
Absolute indifference.
His voice turned serious.
When everything is truly indifferent to you, whether you have a president or a vagrant in front of you, you betray no nervousness. You don't sweat, you don't stammer, your heart doesn't race, like a machine. You understand? The machines detect nothing, and people sense no threat.
And now, Alex's face darkened.
Everything is stable. Only the nocturnal visions give me no peace. It interferes with my work. I begin to dread their arrival. At night.
He clenched his fists.
What are these hallucinations, or do they really come?
He observed me intently.
That is why I ask you, can one return to the previous state? This empathy, it has no place in my line of work.
I studied his face carefully. Contradictory feelings, nostalgia for professional perfection and horror at his own memories. Alex, theoretically, yes. There are pharmaceutical means to reduce the activity of the brain's emotional centers, certain antidepressants, antipsychotics. But the real question lies elsewhere. I paused. Why would you need that? You yourself said you want to leave the profession.
Because I don't know if I will be able to live with this pain.
His voice weakened.
73 people, doctor. Each was someone's son, father, husband. Each had a story, dreams, loved ones who cared for them. The Swiss banker left behind a disabled wife. The tenor was to be married 1 month later. The oligarch funded orphanages.
And now, you understand that.
Yes, and it is unbearable.
He fixed his gaze on mine.
Perhaps it would be better to recover that numbness, rather than go mad with guilt.
I leaned back in my chair, considering my answer. This question touched not only medicine, but the very philosophy of human existence. Alex, I said slowly, what is happening to you can be compared to someone who has been colorblind all their life and suddenly sees the full spectrum. Yes, it is painful. Yes, the world has turned out different from how you imagined it. But it is a return to a fully human life.
But I didn't ask for this awakening.
He objected.
I was comfortable in my black and white world.
Were you truly? I leaned forward. Before speaking of a return to the previous state, I must run further tests. What you describe is an extremely rare case. The awakening of empathy in adulthood, in someone with your profile, may have serious underlying causes. Have you had any head trauma? Prolonged loss of consciousness, concussions, heavy falls? Have you experienced convulsions or involuntary contractions? Memory blackouts? Have you perceived flashes of light before the appearance of these ghosts? Or unusual smells?
No convulsions. There have been falls, brief losses of consciousness, but no concussions.
He answered clearly and added,
Family history reveals no schizophrenia.
I did not remark on his apparent familiarity with medical history-taking and continued calmly. Without further tests, it is difficult for me to make a diagnosis and rule out an organic pathology. Structural changes in the brain are possible. A tumor, microstrokes, neurotransmitter dysfunction. I leaned closer. We need cerebral imaging and laboratory analyses. I am ordering a brain MRI with contrast, blood neurotransmitter levels, serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline. The MRI will allow me to assess circulation in the frontal lobes and confirm the absence of anomalies. Alex grew wary.
Is that obligatory?
Alex, your prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for empathy and emotional regulation, may have been damaged, or on the contrary, something may have activated zones that were previously inhibited. I paused. I have a portable device for a rapid EEG right here. Let us at least look at the brain's baseline activity. I rose and went to the medical cabinet. 15 minutes, and we will have a preliminary picture of the electrical activity, particularly in the temporal and frontal regions.
And what will that tell us?
It will show whether there is abnormal activity in the zones linked to emotional processing. I took out a compact device. Alex, tell me honestly, have you had headaches recently, dizziness, sleep disturbances, in addition to the hallucinations? He thought.
Headaches. Yes, these past 2 months. In the temple region. Sometimes nausea in the mornings.
A worrying symptom. That is important. I approached him with the electrodes. May I? Alex nodded. I placed the sensors, explaining the procedure. Try to relax. Close your eyes. 15 minutes later, I was examining the results on the monitor. What I saw made me frown. Alex, you show a pronounced asymmetry in hemispheric activity. Hyperactivity in the right temporal lobe, the region of emotional memory. I showed him the graph. And the left frontal cortex, responsible for rational control, is functioning at a level below normal.
What does that mean?
It is possible that you are developing a medical condition. I chose my words carefully. We must rule out a temporal lobe tumor, vascular disorders, or a degenerative process. Alex went pale.
A tumor.
It is one of the possible causes. Hippocampal tumors can produce exactly these symptoms: the awakening of suppressed emotions, hallucinations, personality changes. I looked at him gravely. Alex, I strongly recommend a full clinical workup, MRI, detailed lab work, neurological consultation.
How long will that take?
With hospitalization, 3 to 4 days. As an outpatient, 1 to 2 weeks, but less precise. Alex stood and began pacing.
I cannot be hospitalized. Too many people are looking for me. A hospital means records, documents.
Then I will arrange the examination at a private clinic. Complete confidentiality, VIP room, reduced staff. I looked him straight in the eyes. If it is a tumor and it is growing, the symptoms will only worsen. The hallucinations may become permanent. Convulsions and coordination problems may appear.
And if it is not a tumor?
Other possibilities: autoimmune brain inflammation, toxic after effects, a degenerative process. I paused. Or truly, a natural awakening of empathy. But in that case, pharmacological support will be needed. Alex stopped at the window.
What medications?
That will depend on the results. Without organic pathology, antidepressants to stabilize mood, mild antipsychotics to control the hallucinations, possibly anticonvulsants, useful in cases of emotional instability.
And to return to the previous state?
I was briefly silent. Theoretically, yes. High doses of antipsychotics can suppress the emotional centers, but it is dangerous and may cause irreversible changes. I continued gently. Alex, if you truly have a growing tumor, treatment may return you to the previous state in a natural way.
Meaning I would become unfeeling again?
Possibly. But first, we need to understand exactly what is happening. I took a prescription form. Clinique privée Saint-Luc. Complete confidentiality. Accustomed to sensitive cases. I can arrange everything for tomorrow. Alex remained silent, staring out the window.
And if I refuse?
Then we work blind. I will prescribe a basic therapy, but without knowing the causes, its effectiveness will be limited. And if it truly is a tumor, time is critical.
How much time do I have to think?
Judging by the intensity of the symptoms, no more than a week. After that, the condition may deteriorate sharply. Alex turned toward me.
All right, arrange it for tomorrow, but one condition: no official record, no trace in any database.
Agreed. I handed him the clinic's card. And Alex, bring someone you trust, in case an urgent decision needs to be made.
I have no one.
Then I will be there. I will personally oversee the entire process. For the first time since the conversation began, a glimmer of gratitude passed through his eyes.
Thank you, Dr. Morel.
The next day, Clinique privée Saint-Luc. The MRI confirmed what I had partly suspected. No tumor, no microstrokes, no vascular anomalies. Structurally, Alex's brain was intact, but the functional tests revealed something else entirely. Alex, I said, examining the spectral and detailed EEG results. Physically, your brain is healthy, but there are serious neurochemical modifications. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, still wearing the hospital gown.
Meaning,
A sudden surge of activity in the right temporal lobe, the seat of emotional memory and empathy. At the same time, a decrease in prefrontal cortex activity, the region of rational control. I showed him the images. The blood tests reveal a critical drop in serotonin and an elevation of dopamine in certain areas.
and what does that mean?
I took a deep breath. The diagnosis was delicate. You are developing a schizotypal disorder. More precisely, a late-onset, slowly progressive form. I paused. Your brain is reorganizing its emotional functioning. Alex went pale.
Schizotypal.
It is not classical schizophrenia with frank delusions and hallucinations. I was quick to reassure him. It is a borderline state. Your ghosts are not true hallucinations, but pseudo-hallucinations arising against a background of intense emotional stress.
What is the difference?
In true hallucinations, the subject believes in their reality. You know that Kryuchkov cannot actually be standing by your bed. I sat down across from him. It is your brain's attempt to process emotions that have been repressed for years.
Why no?
Schizotypal disorder can manifest at any age, especially after prolonged stress. Your situation was unique. Years of emotional suppression, followed by an abrupt halt to your way of life. I showed him the charts. The modifications in the prefrontal cortex led to this awakening of empathy, which had until then been inhibited.
Will it progress?
Without treatment, yes. It can evolve toward decompensation, with complete social disintegration. But we have a window of opportunity.
What treatment options are there?
I took out a prescription pad. 3 approaches. First, second-generation antipsychotics, aripiprazole or low-dose quetiapine. This will stabilize the dopamine receptors, suppress the pseudo-hallucinations, but risks leading to emotional anesthesia.
Meaning I would become as I was before.
Possibly, but at the cost of losing all capacity for attachment, including toward your mother. Alex clenched his fists.
The second option.
Atypical antidepressants, sertraline or escitalopram, combined with low-dose lamotrigine. They will stabilize the mood and reduce the intensity of the encounters, while preserving the empathy.
And the third.
No medication, only psychotherapy and a radical change of lifestyle. I looked at him steadily. High risk of progression, but if you succeed, you will keep the humanity you have regained. Alex was silent for a long time.
Doctor, if I choose the second option, will I be able to work?
In your former profession, no. The empathy will prevent it. I paused. But you will be able to build relationships, to love, to be happy.
And with the first option?
Technically, you could resume your former activities, but it would be an existence without emotional life. He rose and went to the window.
How much time do I have to decide?
The process is evolving rapidly. 2 weeks at most, after which the changes may become irreversible. I stood beside him. Alex, what does your heart tell you?
My heart.
He gave a bitter smile.
I am only just learning to listen to it. Before, I didn't have one.
Then imagine, in a year's time, you call your mother. Which scenario seems most precious to you? Telling her about your work as a consultant, or introducing her to the woman you love? Perhaps this illness is a gift, a chance to begin again. Alex closed his eyes.
The second option.
He said quietly.
Let us try the second option.
An excellent choice. I wrote out a prescription. We begin with low doses, weekly check-ins, gradual adjustment, and psychotherapy without fail.
And the travel?
Essential. The change of environment will help. But from now on, you have a purpose. Not to flee the past, but to build the future. Alex took the prescription and read through the medications.
Doctor, and if the ghosts don't disappear?
Then speak to them. Explain your plans. Ask for time. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes the dead can be more merciful than the living. He moved toward the door, paused on the threshold.
You know what? For the first time in 3 months, I am not afraid of the coming night. Perhaps Kryushkov will want to hear my plans.
And he left, leaving behind in the office a strange sensation of something both ending and beginning at once. Excerpts from the final notes of Dr. Julian Morel. Final diagnosis: slowly progressive schizotypal disorder. Pseudo-hallucinatory syndrome arising against a background of spontaneous awakening of affective empathy in a subject with a high level of cognitive empathy and functional personality traits. Treatment prescribed and recommendations. Change of place of residence, active travel. Acquisition of new professional skills. Progressive restoration of social bonds. Consideration of anonymous assistance to the families of victims. Emergency contact with the attending physician in the event of deterioration. Prognosis: with strict adherence to recommendations, cautiously favorable. Complete social adaptation possible, with preservation of the emotional sphere and capacity to establish healthy interpersonal relationships. Special note: The patient shows strong motivation for change and good therapeutic compliance with appropriate psychotherapeutic support. Follow-up. Control consultation in 1 month, then as needed. Availability for contact maintained around the clock. This was one of the most unusual and complex cases of my 20 years of practice. A man who had been, for the greater part of his life, a functional psychopath, found himself confronted with the awakening of conscience and empathy.